joining us. I know it's a beautiful day here in Georgia. My name is Dustin Wolf. I'm the state director for the NHSSCA in Georgia. Typically, Josh McClure is our phenomenal host for these power hours, but
Good night, girls. I love you.
he's actually training athletes right now, so I'm going to be our host today. And this is going to be our third installment of the Power Hour and our third for the Speed Series. And I think we got a perfect person for this, Joe Stokowski. I was recently able to listen to him present at our North Georgia Speed Summit. But prior to that, I think we had one of our first Power Hours where some of his slides, some of his graphics were actually used by Tony Villani, and which is pretty interesting because I think it was the other day, maybe yesterday, Joe, our coach Stokowski, had put something on Twitter, and then Mike Boyles is commenting on it. So, you may not recognize his name, but there's some big time coaches that are using his information. So I think it's pretty awesome that we've got him on here to kind of give us some insight and how to use the data that we're collecting on speed stuff. So without any, see if I can get a little mute. Without any other things, I want to turn it over to Joe Stokowski. He's the head track coach. He's not a strength and conditioning coach. He's going to say, like Tony Holler, he's not one of these SC guys, but he's going to give a lot of insight in how to make speed a priority in our training program. So, Coach, I'm going to turn it over to you, give you access to share your screen, and I appreciate everything that you're going to share for us.
All right, let me get this set up real quick. Okay. Share.
There we go.
All right, can y'all see that?
It's just coming up.
All right, you good?
You got it.
Excellent. All right. Hey, thanks for having me. I know there's not a ton of people in this room, but I've given a presentation before where the only person in the room was the guy that was speaking after me. So the fact that any of you are spending any time on Saturday means a lot. Today I'm going to talk. I gave this a very, very, very similar presentation to this about 2 months ago at the North Georgia Speed Summit. I guess it was well received. I'm going to talk today about I have all this data. Great. What now? This is going to be very football centric, but I think some of the ideas can be extrapolated out to all sorts of different uses and different types of sports. So without further ado, I'm Joe Stokowski. I work at Pepperell High School. Quick overview. I'm going to talk about my background, which I think is important, so you kind of understand why I'm here today and how I got here. Some of my influences: speed culture, the quorum sprint, which is the backbone of my presentation today. Record, rank, and publish, which is Tony Holler's big contribution, and I'll talk about that. Data, so how to get the data. Now what do we do with the data? Evidence that speed matters. We know it does, but I can give some objective reasons for that. How we can use the data to identify and intervene with our athletes, and then the 40-yard dash. All right, so first, background, what I am. I am the head boys track coach at Pepperell High School. We're in Northwest Georgia. We're about 90 minutes from downtown Atlanta. I also coach the secondary. I coach the corners and the defensive, the corners and the safeties. And I'm also the special teams coordinator. So the nice thing about those three things is I'm dealing with the fastest kids in school all year, all the time. I am also an English teacher. That was what I got certified in. And when I was in Illinois, I moved to Georgia and did not have any idea that you could take a test and teach a different subject. It's much more complex in Illinois. So what I am not a CSCS, but this beautiful young lady who's my fiance, she is. She has a background in strength and conditioning. She worked at Montana State University. So she's great because I come home all the time with ideas and she'll tell me if they're good ideas or not. I'm also not a strength and conditioning coach, but I would like to be. I'm taking the GACE in PE and health in March. I have a tremendous job at a tremendous place with tremendous leadership. I work under great coaches. But my great passion in life is training athletes, which has come to be in the last couple of years. And it's just something I'm interested in. So if you like what I share today and you want to put my name out there and some goodwill into the universe, I'd appreciate that in a big way. This young lady, right here is Noreen Acton. She's the athletic director at Villa Grove High School. And so I'm going to give you a backdrop of why I'm here in front of you today. I'll give you the short story of it. So 5 years ago, when I was 26 years old, they hired me as the head football coach and head track coach at Villa Grove High School, which is a very small school, about 200 students in East Central Illinois. And when I was going to track meets, there was a school, Shelbyville High School, which is about an hour from us, and they had massage tables at track meets, and they were much better than us. Probably wasn't just the massage tables why they were better at us in track, but I kept asking them, what are you guys doing? And they said, well, we're doing this thing, reflexive performance reset, or RPR, which is obviously really taken off. At that point, it was kind of an obscure thing. Now, obviously, if you're in the strength and conditioning realm, that's you've probably at least heard of it, if not experienced it or been taught in it. So I went to a clinic in Decatur, Illinois, at St. Teresa High School, where Chris Corfist, who is one half of the Tony Holler, Chris Corfist Track Football Consortium group, he taught RPR, and I learned it, and it was great. He was able to tell me why one side of my hips was tighter than the other, and it was because of as I drove, I leaned on the middle console, and I was doing so much driving. He was able to tell me that without me telling him anything. I mean, it was kind of like talking to a psychic. It was kind of cool. I'm a fan of RPR. We do it with some of our kids that buy in. I think it's about 75% legit, 25% placebo. So if a kid really doesn't buy into it, I think it struggles. But I think if a kid buys into it, I mean, me personally, I'll lose my temper with my classes at school. And if I do some of the breathing exercises, I feel better. Kind of gets me settled back down. I mean, I think there's some real validity to it. And so there he advertised one of the track football consortiums, which I think at the time was 5 or 6. And I make this joke. I've been around this stuff, not a really long time, but long enough to remember when actual football coaches spoke at the track football consortium, which it hasn't been that way for a while. And so that's how I got hooked up with Tony Holler, and I met him and got into speed data. Really wanted to get into the merging of speed data with football, not simply taking his ideas and just trying to slap them on top of football, but really getting into the nitty gritty. And so today you're going to hear his name a lot because he's such a big influence on me. But also you're going to see that we do things a little bit different. We're not totally feed the cats. There's some nuance and difference to the way that we do things. These two gentlemen right here, these are the 3 biggest influences in my coaching life. I just mentioned Tony. He's down here in the bottom right corner. Just his methodology for training it was my gateway into speed training. It's cool now because he's just a part of what I do with athletes. But if it wasn't for him and those opportunities, I wouldn't have. It was like a gateway into this thing that I have such a great passion for. These other 2 gentlemen on the left side of my screen, that's Spence Nowinski, who is he works at Miami of Ohio, and he taught me that you can coach kids really, really hard if you love them just as much. And he's a big influence. He was a mentor, and now he's a friend, and was a huge impact on me as a young coach. And then this other gentleman here is Toby Vallis. I worked under him for 3 years at Farmington Central High School in Central Illinois. He's won 30, 38, 39 games over the last 4 years. And he was doing some of this merging of track and football and speed-based football long before it became popular. Long before it was something that was being sold in clinics. He was a college track athlete who had a great passion for football, and his confirmation that some of these things I do are actually worthwhile is a big part of why I've been able to have some of the success that I've had. All right. First off, I think context is really important. What I did here is I pulled this off the Georgia website. I put 3 schools here: Pepperell High School, Douglas High School in downtown Atlanta, and Thomasville High School in South Georgia. The reason I'm sharing this is simply these are the 2 teams that beat us in the playoffs the last 2 years. This past year, we lost to Lovett, who's a private school, so those numbers aren't as readily available. But just kind of showing clearly we have a far less diverse or racially diverse student body. We have a lot more white kids than the schools that we've lost to. Here's why I bring this up, and I don't bring this up to be controversial in any way, shape, or form. Simply what I'm here to say is that we got beat by teams that were faster than us. And I think a lot of times what happens is when you look at your clientele and they're maybe not as fast as the teams that you're getting beat by, people try to go the opposite direction. Now, well, if we're not going to be fast, we're going to be way stronger. And I think that gets overused. And what ends up happening is that you actually get an adverse effect from that. You end up being heavier and slower, magnifying that thing that the other school is better than you at. So the one thing I want to point out is that you're going to see, like, we haven't been bad by any stretch. You're going to see, 2 years ago we went 9-3. Last year we went 5-5. We're winning more games than we're losing. So the reason I bring that up is to show, like, we're successful for an above average to good AA program in North Georgia. But that doesn't mean that we're ranked. That doesn't mean that we're in contention for state championships. So the data I show you today, it doesn't mean, oh, I can take that data and use it for my team. You need to find your own data. Simply that I'm going to share today is just the fact of this is what works for us. And these are some key performance indicators for us at Pepperell High School. All right. Speed is a culture. This picture I got sent by one of my female track athletes. She sent me this last year and she said, aren't these the shapes we're looking for? And it warmed my heart because, you teach a kid something and they take it, and what is teaching? Teaching is they take information from you and they can use it in their own lives. And she was laughing. She said, good leg drive, good arm split. And it was just, this, when you're making that kind of impact on your kids, it's a special deal, and creates bonds that I'll have for the rest of my life. The other thing, and I got this from an athlete, is this graphic. Now, this graphic is complete crap. Now, it's not wrong, but they use these numbers here to try to show that Mbappe, who's one of the best soccer players on earth, is faster than Usain Bolt. They don't magnify the tiny font, right? Peak speed during run to first goal versus Monaco versus the average speed of the 100 meter dash when Usain Bolt broke the world record. Now, we know that Usain Bolt can run 27 miles per hour, the fastest any human being has ever run. Mbappe could probably, if you put spikes on him, put him on a track, could run 24 miles an hour, could maybe run 25. Very, very fast, but not Olympic fast. And so I had one of my athletes sent this to me and they go, this isn't right. And they knew it wasn't right because they knew that this number in comparison to this was 27. I also bring this up because I'm going to be discussing two different types of numbers today. Grass data, and all of our grass data is in helmets and shells and cleats, versus track data, which is obviously not in any kind of weight with track spikes and the differences between those two things. All right. So the big chunk of what I'm going to talk about today is what we do with our football team. And that is I call it the Corum Sprint. Eric Corum he's got a great title, Senior Associate Athletic Director for Student Athlete High Performance at William and Mary University. He's worked at, I think, University of Kentucky. He's worked at a couple different really high profile places. Excellent coach, really nice guy, great follow on social media. 2 summers ago, we were sitting at Track Football Consortium, and I just wanted his opinion on what is football speed. Football speed. We hear that term all the time, but what does it actually mean? And I said, it's really hard to quantify or qualify. And he says, absolutely. But one thing that they were looking at with their athletes was how fast their athlete could run from the 20th to the 30th yard of a sprint. All right. So that's where you're going to see here in a moment what we do with that data, or what we do with that that idea, and then implementation. So what we do it every Wednesday at football practice, during our 8-minute warm up, and I run our warm up for football. So we do a little mini 8-minute track practice. I don't mean like long distance running. I just mean we're working on like little things for speed development and explosiveness and power, 8 minutes as part of our football practice. and understand that the data I'm giving you is in shells, in cleats, on grass. All right. So what that looks like is we line all the kids up in number order. So one would be here, he's ready to go, and then everything for this year it was 88. What they do is they run as fast as they can. So they start from a dead stop, 2-point start. I'm not really worried all that much about the nitty gritty details of this. We're just trying to pull some actionable data off. So that kid runs, and I'm filming with I use a tablet, an old 5-year-old Samsung tablet that's running 30 frames per second. I mean, it's about as much broken than it is working these days. But it's what we use, and I'll explain here in a second why I like doing that, because you could do it with a high res, Apple, iPhone, whatever, and you could sit there all day and try to figure out what your times are, because you could second guess it over and over and over. I'll make sense of that here in a second. So I have one coach here, and what he does is he waits till this kid gets to this first set of cones, and then he sends the next kid, and we have just kids run right after another, one right after the other. And I'm sitting here filming this part. So what that looks like, this video actually didn't work the last time I did this presentation because I think YouTube was blocked at the school. But if you look really carefully, and it's really hard to see because this is the end of the season 2 years ago, there's 2 cones right here, and then there's 2 cones right here. And I'm holding the camera steady, and they just run through. And I know it's kind of choppy. But you see it's not taking much. And you see some kids are trying their hardest. Some kids are, it was very, very last game of the season. I'll have a kid run through here really fast here in a second. That kid right there. That's our top track kid right now. But this is just our way of pulling speed data off our kids in the season. We don't have to watch this whole thing, but I will show you that the video itself is only 1 minute and 13 seconds. So the reason I bring that up is that we're taking between setup and implementation of practice time. There's our lineman. Boom, it's over. That only took 75 seconds to time 60 kids. Period. So what we do is when practice is over, what I do is I take that film and I look to see essentially when the kid entered the cone. So I would look here, and a lot of this is objective, but I'm looking is his hip through these 2 cones vertically? And I would say, no, not yet. So I'm going to start the clock on the frame. And again, it's a crappy camera. It's only running 30 frames per second. So his body's only moving every 300ths. Boom. I would say he is through on the next frame. All right. And he's running. There he goes. And then at the end, I'd say he's not through there yet, but by the next frame, boom, he is. So we ran 103. That's a very, very, very fast 19 miles per hour, which for this drill, you'll see in a second here, has a lot of validity. All right. This is another thing you can do. And this is the gentleman I showed you a second ago. The kid, he's a 22 miles per hour kid, but he can actually run. And I know this is not earth shattering, but for AA in Georgia, this kid will be a state qualifier likely in the 2 sprint events. He can run 22 miles per hour in spikes over 60 yards for a continuous for 60 yards. So he has I would like good max velocity, and he has even better speed endurance. So he caught a screen pass down at about the 12-yard line. And so that's why you're going to go, well, your kid didn't run 21 miles per hour in a game. Well, he did. But keep in mind that a lot of the fastest plays that are happening in the NFL by ball carriers are happening when they're getting a whole lot of straight line room to run. So this is like the 30th yard of this pass, maybe even more than that. So I would look here and say he's not there yet. I'd say he is there or close enough to there. Here, he's 95 seconds for 10 yards, about 193. I mean, it's really hard to argue that he hasn't covered 20 yards in that time, and 193 over 20 yards is going to be 21 miles per hour. I take that, I put it on a video, I put it on Twitter, and it'll get 1,000 views by lunch on Saturday after we play on a Friday night. And it's a great way for us to get our kids recruited. Really, really simple. All I had to do is go to Huddle, screen grab the video, upload it on Coach's Eye, And that's how I pulled that data off. Now the cost, it's a one-time purchase on the Coach's Eye. Now listen, I'm not endorsing Coach's Eye. I love it. I use it because I bought it. But you could use anything, Huddle Technique, Dartfish. There's 1,000 things out there that you could use for this. And like with the Coach's Eye, if you look like over here, I had to move the boxes of where our heads are at. You can see like there's a stopwatch. You can draw crooked lines. You can draw straight lines. You can make angles. You can do different things. So that may be free now. I don't know. This is a couple years ago when I bought the suite on the website or on the app. So, but here's what I think it has a lot of validity. We take 3 minutes of practice time per week. And we get actionable speed data from that. And you'll see here in a second, but we do more things than you could ever imagine with that, with just that data. And it takes me 20 to 30 minutes post practice time per week to scrub the film, pull the times off, put them into a spreadsheet, record, rank, and publish. We take that, we put it on Twitter so the kids run fast and they like competing with one another. And I gave Tony credit there because that's, I think he did a better job of, I think he was a pioneer in merging. We know how we want to sprint train and we know what gets kids excited. And so this is just, I pulled this off my Twitter. So you can see that all the kids ran and you can see, 19 miles an hour, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14. And also we take all these kids and if you PR'd, we make a big deal out of it. So it's just as big of a deal for us if a kid jumps from 15 to 16 as it is from 18 to 19. This is not a very fast day. There's a lot of times that we'll get everything will shift 1 mile per hour over. So we'll get a couple kids at 20. I think this was really late in the season this year from this school year. All right, so this is what all the data looks like when it gets put all together. And I know it looks like a color salad. It doesn't really mean much to you, but I'm gonna go through real quick what data we have here and what actual decisions we're able to make on the football field with this data. All right, so starting from the left, here it says TS. TS stands for track speed. And as you see these colors here, like 22 is white, 21 is gray and yellow, 20 is red and white. Those colors are arbitrary. They don't mean anything to you listening to me talk right now, but they mean the world to our kids. And we know that because we do the rapid wristbands. You see here, it says the miles per hour. On the other side, it says faster dragons. And so our kids know when they see those colors, they correlate to the speed. So there's a lot of kids you could ask them, like you could see the red wristband from all the way down the hallway and you'd know, boom, that kid's a 20 mile per hour kid. And it's something that it's fun for our kids. If you could do anything that it's going to engage your athletes, it's a win. The next 3 lines is something that I really dove into this year. I wanted to find a really easy metric to look at for size of players. So real simple, I take their height in inches, I take their weight in pounds, and then I divide pounds by inches. So pounds per inch. And the greener it is here, the bigger they are, the redder it is, the smaller they are. So you can see I have a freshman boy here who is 5'7", 117 pounds. So he's 1.75. That kid is very, very small. Other kids up here, like I'm trying to see who's the biggest kid we have. So like we have a 3.1 right here. So that kid is a bigger size kid. He's 5'9", 215. Now I know that for us, that's a decent size lineman. I know if you get up into 5, 6, 7A, that kid is going to have to be, an H-back or a linebacker. But for AA for us, he's very effective. All right. Then these 3 lines is what is their minimum time this year? What is their second fastest time this year? It's minimum minus. So sometimes, obviously I'm pulling those times off. It's a touch subjective. Just sometimes I like to make sure that I don't have an outlier in the sauce. And then I have the third fastest time they've run this year. And that's more of a consistency metric. For instance, this kid right here ran 9 twice, but he ran 109 twice, but he ran 119 was his third fastest. Part of that was he was having a hip issue. Part of that was he's a freshman and getting things figured out. Part of that was because he was gone. He moved to Texas and then moved back, all within the season. their position, their offensive position, their graduation year, how many touchdowns they've scored. And then all these lines up here are the school that we played. So, if you know Lovett High School, they're navy blue and sky blue. So that was the last game that we played. And as you look here, you see these times, and obviously there's a lot of pink on this chart. And pink is any reason that an athlete didn't run. So we've got all sorts of stuff here. We've got a broken 5th metatarsal of our fastest kid on the team. We had a kid had to get his heart checked. Had a knee twinge. We had tests. This kid was was a virtual student who had to come and take tests in person at school. Staph infection, hamstring injuries, vacation, Texas, any Qs or kids that were quarantined, shoulder injuries, ankles, all sorts of stuff. So there was way less pink on last year's chart than there was on this year's chart, because we if you're in this chat right now, you're coaching in a world of chaos. There's less chaos today than there was 4 months ago, but we know how tough that was. And then 2 weeks, one of the weeks we got sent inside because of weather. And then this week we didn't have practice that day because Hurricane Zeta that rolled through, we got the remnants of that. So that canceled our practice. So we didn't actually miss a single timing day at all 2 years ago. And this year we missed 2 just because of weather. Because, with COVID, of course, we needed bad weather on top of it. All right. And then over here, these are real simple. This one is the average. So you take every time and divide it by the number of times they've run. Here is the trim. And what I do with that is I just drop the fastest and the slowest times. It gives me a more realistic number, drops out some outliers. F7 and L7 is the first 7 times they ran this year versus the last 7 times they ran. FLD is first last difference. So I got to move our faces real quick so I can see it. So as you see here, anything that is negative is great. That means the kid's faster now than they were at the beginning of the season. All right. And then difference, and this is real simple. I take their average. I take their time that week and subtract their trim average, and that gives me this. So anything that's blue is a cause for concern, and I'm going to go into that here in a little bit once I slide through this. All right. So what you're going to see on the next couple slides is just the same chart organized in different ways and how we intervene with our kids. All right. So the first thing is a real simple metric. So what I did is I organized first by pounds per inch. So the first time I sorted, it gave me the biggest kid to the smallest kid on the team, and then I sorted by track speed mile per hour. All right. So a couple kids I want to show right here. Essentially, all we're getting here is who's the biggest kid that can run that fast. A couple kids I want to point out here. This young man, as we look here, he's run 21 miles per hour on the track. He did that actually not this summer, but the previous summer. Came back. He weighed 162 pounds when he came off of quarantine. He's a kid that probably was more effective athletically at about 150, 155. So he actually didn't ever run 19 miles per hour in practice. Now that's on grass. We're usually looking, once you get into really, really fast speeds, 1 mile per hour makes a big difference. But in terms of most of our kids that we're dealing with here, you're going to see about a 2 mile per hour jump from their average on grass to their speed on the track. So you see here 19 to 21, 19 to 21. So this is a kid that I looked at that. What did we have? We had a hamstring injury earlier in the year. We had a sickness, and you can see his times got better, but he was never able to get over that hump. So that was a kid that we did not do a very good job with this year. And that showed itself in games. He did not have, we thought he might have a breakout year, and he didn't really make that jump like we were hoping he would. The other one is this arrow down here. This kid was 19 miles per hour on the track. He had never run track before. He was a good wrestler. He's actually, I can vouch for him now, he's a great wrestler. He won the AA 150 pound state championship a couple weeks ago. But he came out and ran track for the first time ever. It was the first time he'd ever sprinted, in a competitive sense. And he was 19 miles an hour. It was great to have him out there. He was going to be our backup quarterback. Well, the problem is that you look here on this line, we have a 20 mile per hour senior quarterback who didn't play a single snap all year because of a non-football related knee injury. So this young man ended up having to be our quarterback. Well, what's great about this is that he actually was able to hit 19 miles an hour one day and was hanging out a lot of days at 18. As you see here, he was pretty consistent. So he actually saw a speed jump, which was really important considering he took every meaningful quarterback snap for us this football season. So that was the kid that our intervention did some good with. All right. The next thing I'm going to show you is how we can actually make actionable football decisions from this data. Now, this is obviously not a be-all, end-all, but just some ideas that I want to throw out there. So what I did here is I sorted by, the first thing I did was I filtered by pounds per inch. So I wanted to see every kid on our team that was 2.6 or larger pounds per inch. And then what I did is I sorted by their second fastest time they'd run all season. Okay. So you see here, there's no reds in this PPI line. I took out all the skinny kids. What we needed is one of our two-way starter kids who was a special teams couldn't do without kid. He also broke his foot. We had 2 fifth metatarsals in the same season. I mean, it was just, it was incredibly frustrating this year. But what happens a lot of times is as a coach, if you're late, middle to late in the season, and you have to fill in a spot on a special team, a lot of time you'll put a kid that you trust. But sometimes a kid that you trust doesn't necessarily have the speed capabilities to do the job. Now, we don't run like a shield punt. We run a more traditional punt. So our guys up front need to be able to not manhandle people, but put a hip and a body in front of somebody, block, and then cover. So you can't put a small person to fill that gap, or you're going to have coverage issues. And what popped up is this young man right here, who was he's a sophomore player. He was a JV kid all the way in terms of his knowledge of the playbook. But he was a name that popped up of a kid that we weren't using at all on varsity. And, not the most savvy football player in the world, but if we could insert him into that spot and we could teach him the 2 calls, we could teach him to step the right way, we could teach him to identify the right person to block, and then he has the speed ability to cover. We would be able to fill the gap with a kid who has the size that we need, who has the speed that we need, that was a sophomore that we maybe wouldn't have been, we wouldn't have put in that situation otherwise. So that was using this data to make a decision to improve our team. All right, let me move our heads real quick. All right, over here is first last difference. So I sorted by that. So if you have anything that's in the negatives, that's great. That means that you're faster in the second half of the season than you were on the first half of the season. And if you look over here, what kind of people is it? A lot of them are our larger players. A lot of them are our linemen. If you look here, freshman. So you have a lot of your younger kids. There's a lot of people in strength and conditioning who take credit for puberty and genetics. So I am not naive here. I know that freshmen are going to get faster, and I'm going to talk about that here in a second. But just knowing that makes you feel better as a coach. Just knowing that we're able to, we're tracking these kids. They are getting faster. They are getting better. It's a big boost for the kid, I think. It gives them some confidence. Another kid I want to show you right here is the second kid in this line. His name is Lem Aslan. He won our offensive lineman of the year this year. He plays center for us. He actually broke 6 seconds in the 40 for the first time ever a week ago. Now, I know that's not blazing by any means, but for a kid who is 5'11", now he's closer to 6 foot, 270 pounds for us at our level. The fact that he's able to put down these times, he's a 16 mile an hour on the track guy. He's a 15 mile an hour on grass guy. If we can move him to the next slot, if he can get to 17 and 16, that's going to put him in a really elite level for AA linemen. So he's a kid who's committed to speed, worked on speed, and has had obviously a major payoff here. That big of a drop from an upperclassman is something that was not expected, but very welcomed. All right. And then this last one here, diff. I'm going to talk about something here that's going to be kind of sad. What we do here is you see this kid here. was 3 times 19 miles per hour. He's 21 miles per hour on the track. He ran, would have been 16 miles that day. Way slower than he'd ever run. Seemed off at practice all week. We weren't really sure what was up. We found out later that his father had been diagnosed with COVID-19. A couple weeks later, he passed away. So a lot of times you're going to see things pop up in data that is real. You know, it's something that it gives us a chance to intervene with that kid and just I got this data on Wednesday and I didn't know that his dad was in bad shape until Friday. So it was like, well, what's wrong with him? Well, there it is. If you look over here, I've boxed up everybody that is 0.03 or larger, slower than their average. What that would mean is, remember the crappy tablet I was talking about earlier. So we're looking at anybody who's 1 frame slower than their average. And what we're going to do is every kid that's on this list, we're going to intervene with that kid. Not in a big way. I'm just going to grab them. Hey, what's going on? And sometimes it's something serious. Sometimes it's because that week of practice, we practiced in the morning because it was Thanksgiving week. And kids are really bad about responsible sleep habits. So they didn't, coach, I haven't been getting enough sleep. I haven't been drinking enough water. But every once in a while, it's, our power got shut off or something along those lines. Now, that doesn't mean that thing is the reason they ran slow, but it does give us a pretty good insight into some of the things that we can do just for our athlete well-being. I mean, speed is a great expressor of the central nervous system. And so whenever there's something off in that chain, you're not going to be able to run as fast as you usually run. And this is our way of being able to intervene with those kids. So that's been something that from just a well-being standpoint, and obviously this year well-being was more important this year than it's ever been for our kids going through what they're going through, man, what we're all going through. So that was something that I thought did our kids some good. All right. So now I'm going to take that and put it into more obvious things. So I have a chart here, and here on, is this the x-axis and this is the y-axis? I always get confused on that. English teacher, I never did real well in math. This axis here is showing what their second fastest time they ran all year was. So you remember that kid I showed you earlier who ran 103. You see there's some 103s down here, right? You see everything up to like 150 somethings, right? Like very big. So the further you are to the right, the bigger you are, the higher you are, the slower you are. So you want to be in this big and fast corner, right? But we know realistically, a lot of our skill kids our fast skill kids are going to hang out right about here. And you see a big jumble of that right there. So this is just the raw data. Here at the bottom, this is by their pounds per inch. I didn't really say much about pounds per inch earlier, but one thing that you can look at with this is anybody that's smaller than 2.0 is probably not going to be able to contribute at the varsity level in AA in Georgia, in Region 7 AA. You're just very small. Most of our best skill kids are hanging out here at about 2.2 to 2.4. Most of our linebackers are hanging out at about 2.7 to 2.8. A lot of our offensive linemen, the smaller ones are about 3.0. The bigger ones are about 3.3, 3.4, 3.5 here. And obviously that kid I was talking about earlier, he's right there. So he's 3.8, but he's actually, this line here is an average, right? He's actually faster than the average for his size on the team. So that's a big deal. Now I know it's just dots in a line right now. I'm going to break that down even further. All right. Oh, and here's miles per hour as it correlates. So you see like a lot of our kids are kind of pooled around here. I'm going to show you here why these kids right here need to move there. That'll make sense here. And it's one of the slides coming up. All right. This is a very, very, very similar chart. What I have here is pounds per inch on the bottom here, and I have the 20-yard fly times from 900 and some NFL draft draftees from the last 5 years. And you see the correlation 0.856. So it takes what it takes to be able to be successful in the NFL. You have to be fast enough. Now, what I tried to do, and this was a act in futility. I tried to see, does being faster make you a better football player? And what I mean by that is you have to be fast enough. But what I didn't find is it wasn't like everybody that was here was better than everybody that was on the line. Really, what it was more about is this is a good indicator of the groupings that you have to be in to be able to be successful. There's very few outliers for obvious reasons. It takes what it takes, to borrow some Sabanese. So, and you also see this big divide right here. So skill guys had to be a certain speed, big guys had to be a certain speed. I showed you earlier where 4.0, and let me be clear here, 4.0 for our team that I coach is usually very, I mean, that kid is going to be looked at as obese. But in the NFL, those people are still objectively obese by, BMI standards, but they're very fast. I mean, you look at some of these people that are like, some of them that are hanging out close to 2.0 for a 20-yard fly on turf, carrying around 300 some pounds. I mean, there's freaks for a reason. Freaks are freaks for a reason. All right. So here are 2 lines, and these are completely arbitrary. Well, not completely arbitrary, but I just took some data, and that red line is what I think you need to be close to be a D1 player. The green line is where you have to be approximately, and that green line is taken directly from that previous chart and slapped on top of mine with a couple assumptions about some things. But that green line is what it takes to be an NFL player. Now, that's not being more skillful makes you not have to be as close to the line, but being less skillful, like you can't be, less skillful and slower. That's how you don't make it. All right. I put 2 arrows here. One of them is a kid that's 6'2", 183 pounds. The other one is 6 foot, 204 pounds. And I'm going to show you who those kids are. And I want to make this clear. These people I put on this chart before I put the lines on the chart. So the fact that they fell on the lines made me feel good about some of the assumptions I was making. All right. Well, there's actually 3 characters I put here. The first one, if you see here in the bottom right corner, that is the Juggernaut. The Juggernaut is a supervillain in the X-Men universe. That is what we want all of our football players to be, right? We want them to be 400 pounds and run a 4.4. If we had a team full of those, we'd never lose and we'd be the greatest coach on earth. So we know that's superhuman to be that fast at that size, but that doesn't, it gives us kind of this, we want to pull dots to the bottom right corner of the chart. All right. These 2, they were kids when these pictures were taken. They were in high school. This one here on the left, his name's Peyton Rhodes. Peyton Rhodes played for me, ran track for me, was a honorable mention All-State player, was the Northwest Georgia basketball player of the year, would have had a good track season had he been able to, had we had one last year. He got a very healthy scholarship to Sacred Heart University to play FCS football. So the fact that he fell on the fringe of the D1 line fit about with where his intrigue was. He had a handful of D2 offers, 1 D1, and he jumped at the D1. Couldn't have been happier for him. His dad is actually our offensive coordinator. Him and I are very close friends. And he didn't do track until his senior year. He actually played baseball, but every Sunday he would come up and work with me on speed training, which has now become Sunday Run Day, which is it's open to anybody speed training that I do. Just, labor of love. But this is the kid that came out and worked his tail off to get faster and faster and faster. And there he fell on that line. Good sized kid, right? Like legitimate 6'2", not huge by any stretch, but a good sized player. Then this other kid here, this is Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby played at Callaway High School, was an all-state running back, was, I think, the freshman offensive player of the year in the SEC this year at Auburn. And you see he falls right now, and I pulled his speed data off some different laser to laser combine times he had different places. I made some assumptions, but he falls right on this green line. So it's a no-brainer that he was a D1 player. He was a 5-star running back. I mean, but really when you're a 5-star running back, your goal is to play in the NFL. And from some of the assumptions I made, even if he's down here and he's in that, close to 1 second from 20 to 30 in grass range, he's already the size needed to be able to be ready to go to the combine and genetically fit. So those lines are not be all end alls, but they're kind of a cool metric to look at and kind of figure where your kids are at. Another thing too is, as you look here, we don't have anybody close. These kids look like they're close, but they're really not as much as you think. This gentleman right here actually, well, I shouldn't say he's not close. He had an FCS offer that was one of those bulk offers. They sent it to 10 kids, first 3 that committed. He was not one of those 3, so he ended up, we redirected his interests, and he ended up getting a very, very significant scholarship to play football at West Georgia, where he's going to be playing next year. And this young man, this kid is kind of an outlier. He's stumpy. He's like 5'8", 210, and very, very fast for how big he is. So he's close here. But the problem with kids that are that size is that if he were to put on 20 pounds, it would affect him so dramatically that there's really, when you don't have the frame to put the weight on, you're going to see some speed decreases. Now, listen, I hope he doesn't. I hope he gets bigger and faster and we have a freak on our hands. But a lot of times that jump is significant. And there's a lot of kids that hang out right above this line. It's really hard to get to that line. All right. Do these numbers matter? Well, you tell me. So in 2019, we scored 4.1 touchdowns per game. We went 9-3. We advanced to the second round of the playoffs. 98% of our touchdowns were scored by kids who ran 19 miles per hour or faster on grass, on Wednesdays, in cleats and shells. So earlier I mentioned the fact of we had a bunch of kids on that 18 mile an hour. Getting them to 19 miles an hour is incredibly, incredibly important. This past year, we went 5-5. We were beat in the first round of the playoffs. We had 80% of our touchdowns were scored. And then 97% were scored by 18 or faster, but we scored 3.5 touchdowns per game. Last year's team would have beat this year's team by probably 2 or 3 scores if they were to play a game. So speed definitely mattered. All right. So here's a look of, these are all the kids on our team that scored more than 1 touchdown more than 1 touchdown this season. The arrows, and it's kind of hard to tell the difference between actually I don't think there is any. Yeah, there is. It's hard to tell the difference between the orange and the yellow. But the reds are kids that were seniors this year. And so obviously it's a little bit skewed because we have one kid that's so good. He's a sophomore running back who scored 19 touchdowns this year. But you can see that a majority of our touchdowns are scored below that line. I can tell you these other 2 kids, this young man right here is an undersized, and we know that because of how far he is on the chart. And he probably, if he ran it today, would be below that line. He's actually had a big speed jump here in the last 3 months. But he scored both of those touchdowns against the worst defense we saw all season. And this young man right here was our quarterback who, same speed, try hard kid. And I mean that the most complimentary way possible. But I believe one of those was a scamper and one of them was a quarterback sneak. So sometimes with quarterbacks, they're going to score the ball because they're touching the ball. But you can see that line is significant for us. All right. And then on track, on the track, 98% of touchdowns were scored by kids who ran 20 miles per hour or faster. 2/3 were scored by 21. 89% this year, 77%. So that 21 mile per hour threshold is big for us. All right. Here's a look at our 6 starting linemen this year. And you can see that while there's dots up here, right, these 6 kids were the 6 starters for us. This kid right here, I hope you can see my mouse. This kid right here, he broke his foot and was replaced by this kid. So we see, what do we get? We get a little bit heavier kid, smaller frame, but heavier kid, but who is markedly slower than this kid. All right. So that's, you talk about linemen. Well, linemen don't have to be fast. They don't need to be down here, but they need to be fast for how big they are. All right. I took every guy out for that graduated, and this is what we have left. So these are all of our returning starters. And I'm going to talk about these dots right here and their relevance to our team. All right. This dot right here, I said we want to move everybody down to the bottom right corner, except for this kid. This kid's about 4.3 pounds per inch. He's only about 5'9", 5'10". If he can lose weight, he's going to be a good player for us. If we can get him down to about 270 pounds, his dot is going to move this way. It's going to be great because he's going to have better cardiovascular endurance and he's going to get faster. He's already faster how big he is. He's not a bad athlete for how big he is. The problem is his bigness takes him out of consideration for he doesn't have any wind. I mean, he's if he can get into a better shape, his dot will move here and he'll have a chance to play for us. All right. These 4 dots right here, these 3 are yellow. This one here is orange. The nice thing about these guys is sometimes your freshman linemen, they'll be sophomores next year. They're slow, but they're getting faster. And a lot of them through puberty, from 14, 15 to 15, 16 years old, they're going to make a jump, full-time in the weight room. All of these guys, he plays baseball, but these 2 are love doing the sprint workouts at track. They're not fast, but we celebrate them jumping from 14 to 15 miles per hour like we do any other kid. All right. These 2 dots right here, I make notice of them because one of them we think of as a D lineman, one of them we think as a linebacker. But right now their dots are literally overlapping on the chart. So you see, we don't have a lot of like linebacker bodies. Linebacker bodies are going to exist, like good ones are going to exist about right here, 2.7 that can run about 18 miles an hour. So we need these dots to move this direction. But the other thing to think about is sometimes kids that you have to think about them in a new way. All right. And then down here, I just circled these 2 kids because these are 2 kids that have the speed profile that we need to be successful, but didn't have success this year in the form of starting. This red circle, he's a senior who didn't come out his freshman year. And he's a kid that is not incredibly football savvy, but he's fast and he's big enough. So we got to find a way to get him on the field in some way, shape, or form. If we're not, we're wasting his speed and we're not doing a good job as coaches. And then here in the orange, very similar situation. We've got to find, as coaches, it's our job to identify our best athletes and get them on the field. And so these dots are ones that I've actually talked to our head coach about as kids that we really need to intervene with, because if we can get half of these circles to be starters next year, we'll be much better off as a football program. All right. Jumping over to the 40-yard dash, because our kids do that as well. A lot of our data comes from the 40. But this is a breakdown of, and this is the chart that popped up in Tony's presentation. This is my baby. There's over 900 pieces of data that have gone into this. And what it does is it gives you, if you have a timing system and you have an ability to time gates, or to time using timing gates, these are about what you have to run a certain speed. Now, there are kids that are really good accelerators and not great top end. There's kids that are great top end, but not good accelerators. And I'll show you what that looks like for me locally. But this chart is one that we use. So when we time our kids, we color code it with this chart when they run the 40 so they can see, am I a good accelerator compared to my time? Am I a good transition speed compared to my time? Am I a good top end compared to my time? All right. And this is just, you see, this is 10-yard segments. There's a little bit of assumption here because they don't take a 30-yard split at the NFL Combine. But then the 20 sections, so 0 to 20, 10 to 30, 20 to 40, and then the 30 chunks. So 0 to 30 and 10 to 40. The big thing we look for, I've had 2 kids ever on the free lap 40 break 2.7, and they happen to be the only 2 kids that have received Division I scholarships as skill players. So I'm waiting for a kid to break that trend, but for now, that's a really, really good stat for me to use as a way to convince our kids to get better. All right. This is huge. Some people may not think this is a big deal, but I think this is maybe my greatest thing that I've ever accomplished on Twitter is getting this admission. Zybex Sports is who times the combine data. And they said, yeah, I was actually put in my place. I was like, well, no, they have FAT data. And they're like, no. There's 2 times that are taken. One of the times it is taken is a guy sitting at the 6-yard line who holds down a trigger until the person takes off and they release it. The other one is they actually use a laser across the hand at the start line. And so they actually have 2 pieces of data. Guess which one we get to see as the public? We get to see the faster one because, 4.2 is sexy. But Zybek came out and I said, well, what is the difference? And he says, I don't have any published papers on that question yet. However, if a coach is at the 6-yard line, the average is 0.085 seconds. However, there's a plus or minus 0.05 or seconds or larger, 1 standard deviation in the best case. But here's what I would say. If you just in your mind add 0.08 to every time you've ever thought of at the NFL Combine, you start to realize real quick that no one, and if there is someone, it's less than I have fingers on this hand, have ever actually broken 4.3 at the Combine, which means there's way less 4.3 people, right? Which means there's less 4.4 people, which means there's less 4.5 people, so on and so forth. What does that mean? It means that when a kid says he's 4.5, if he really was 4.5, it would pop out on film lightning fast. My 2 best kids right now in my track program, one of them runs 4.7 low, one of them runs 4.8 low, which for us using the free lap, and I'll show you that here in a second, they run on the track 11 low and 11 mid. No one catches them in games that we play. When they get out, they score touchdowns. And everybody tells me that they're 4.4. Well, either I tell this to coaches all the time, they'll be like, well, we have 6 kids under 4.4. And I go, well, one of these 2 things has to be true. Either your kids really aren't 4.4 or you're the worst football coach I know. Because if I had that many fast kids that were actually 4.4, we never lose a game. All right. So free lap data. I have a free lap. We don't use it during practice, football practice, because it's really fast. It's really helpful. It's great, but timing a bunch of people in a very analytical fashion is doesn't get it done in 90 seconds for 60 kids. Let me just put it that way. So I have 2 kids right here. One of them is that kid that ran 21 miles per hour in game. He's a senior this year. The other one is the kid who went to Sacred Heart. He's a freshman in college this year. If you look at these times, if I give you the 10-yard data, it's really choppy and really sloppy. All right. So the 10-yard data showed that this guy ran his splits were indicative of somebody that we were going to run 4.8, 4.2, 4.9, 4.8. Those are really choppy. You would say, well, that's not a very good metric. And I would say, you're right, free lap doesn't do a good job of 10-yard splits. So when people talk about using yardage splits for free lap, that's kind of where I come out and say, well, we want to be careful with that. But what we can look at, though, is if we look over here, the 20-yard splits are pretty good. Now, the reason that I added a cone in the last year, so now we have this 30-yard split. So that's why these 2 times don't have it and these 2 times do. But now we start, free lap does a really good job if it can check itself, if it can put a correction in. And so this top kid and then the 3rd kid is the same kid. And the 2nd kid and the 4th kid is the same kid. So now you're starting to see their times kind of coagulate into things that are more reasonable. So this kid right here, the 271 is a very good accelerator for us. He's the best accelerator I've had through 20 yards. The kid in the 284 kid is the best top end speed kid I've had. And you see his speed is shown later in the race, where this kid his speed is shown early in a race, even though their times are virtually the same. 2 of the big metrics we're looking for. This is how we get to our kids. We say, we want you to run 4.69. How do we do that? The first thing we want to do is we want to get this number below 2.7. If we can get this number below 2.7, we're good. Now I'm talking about 2.69 is good. And then we want to get this number right here from 10 to 40 below 3. If we can do that, we're going to break that time. Now, this kid, this 273, the top kid and the 3rd kid, this being the same kid, he has run 268. He's run quicker. I just wanted to show times that are virtually the same have massively different splits. Now, why does that matter? Well, I stole this from Cameron Jose. I gave him credit up here. He took over for Matt Rhea and those guys when they went to Alabama. I saw him speak at TFC about 3-4 years ago. You could tell then he was an incredibly smart, sharp guy. He came out with this chart. And while this is not a black and white be all end all chart, it gives me some direction in that if I have like my kid who's not a great accelerator, but great on his top end, we're going to focus on some of these things. Like we've been doing some sled pushes with him, right? He's one of those kids that's very strong in the weight room, but we don't always see great transfer over into early parts of his running ability. So we're really hitting these, where the other kid I showed who was very good here, but didn't have the max speed potential. We were working some of these drills. All right. I'm to steal a line from Forrest Gump, I'm not a smart man, but I do know who some of the smartest people in the business are. And when they put things out like this, it can give us some great direction in some of the training things that we can do, interventions with our kids. All right. I think I made it a little bit over an hour, but this is my contact information. I'm on Twitter, Instagram. That's my email, and that's my cell phone number. If any of you ever need anything from me, I'm an open book. And if I know there's some people in this chat that know me personally, and whatever I have, I'm willing to share. And I could talk speed for hours and hours and hours. Thank y'all for listening. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. And thank you to Dustin and the Georgia chapter of the Strength Coaches Association for the opportunity today.
Joe, that was amazing, man. I appreciate it. I can speak for everybody that's on here and whoever gets to watch it on the recording, but we could probably sit and listen to you and teach us stuff about how to use data to not only motivate our kids, but to use it to, like you said, in some of those things, kind of get to know them and get to know them where they are at that day. That stuff is huge, huge impactful of making relationships with your athletes. So Coach, I appreciate it greatly. I know we want to stick to that hour, but like you said, I can speak personally that I've had to reach out to Coach Stokowski before and just say, hey, man, can you help me with this? And without a doubt, he's going to help you. He's one of the great ones, and we appreciate everything that he's shared with us and everything that he can hopefully share with us in the future, man. I appreciate you. Guys, thank you for your time, and look forward to the next Power Hour in the near future. I will give a quick shout out to Coach Herschel. We have a state clinic coming up in Alabama on March 6th. So if you guys are interested in that, please, if you're close enough to it to be, it's one of our first in-person events. But if you're interested in that, you can register for it on our website. But man, have a great rest of the weekend, guys, and I appreciate all of you.